Everything you're about to hear is just my assessment. It's my opinion and not to be taken as fact. The December 20th, 2024 episode of the Wake Up and Win podcast featuring Jonathan and Suzy Lamb is nothing short of a seismic challenge to the culture of secrecy that permeates certain ministry environments. The Lambs laid bare the timeline of their ordeal with precision, providing clear and consistent details that contrast sharply with the fragmented and often contradictory narrative from Joni Lamb. The discrepancy between these accounts underscores a troubling dynamic: truth paired with documentation versus obfuscation cloaked in authority. Jonathan and Suzy's testimony is remarkable not just for its coherence, but also for its grounding in documented evidence, whether through official investigations, forensic counseling evaluations, or corroborative eyewitness accounts. These are not mere allegations, but a meticulous presentation of facts. This stands in stark contrast to Joni Lamb, whose narrative shifts with each retelling and remains conspicuously devoid of substantive proof. The absence of documented support on her part raises serious questions about her credibility and intentions. The Lamb's account is harrowing and exposes the deeply ingrained dysfunction within their family and ministry. From the initial allegations of abuse involving their daughter to the pressure exerted by Joni to manage the crisis on her terms, the story is a devastating indictment of misplaced priorities. Rather than focusing on justice for a vulnerable child, the family's leadership appears more preoccupied with preserving institutional reputation, a pattern that reflects systemic rot. Central to the Lamb's narrative is their insistence on protecting their daughter, despite facing relentless opposition from within their family. Jonathan and Suzy's actions, such as immediately contacting law enforcement and involving forensic counselors, showcase their commitment to accountability. In contrast, Joni's handling of the situation, including her alleged obstruction and attempts to steer the narrative, points to a culture of control and suppression. Her reported behavior, including questioning Suzy's credibility and dismissing critical incidents, is a textbook example of how spiritual manipulation can compound trauma. Another critical dimension is the emotional and spiritual toll the Lambs endured while navigating these challenges. Jonathan and Suzy's journey is a testament to their resolve to prioritize their daughter's well-being over institutional loyalty. This stands as a stark rebuke to the toxic environment fostered by Joni and others in positions of authority. It is telling that Joni, despite her influence, has failed to produce any compelling evidence to support her counter-narrative. Her reliance on rhetoric, unsubstantiated claims, and vague recollections only deepens the divide between her account and the Lamb's truth. The podcast episode also highlights the disturbing inconsistencies in Joni's statements over time. Unlike Jonathan and Suzy, who have provided a consistent timeline and explanation at every stage, Joni's story changes depending on the context. This inconsistency not only undermines her credibility, but also serves as a stark reminder of how truth, when subjected to repeated manipulation, becomes a casualty of self-interest. Furthermore, the Lambs' decision to go public with their story reflects remarkable courage. They risked everything: relationships, careers, and financial stability to shed light on what transpired. Their choice to pursue transparency, even in the face of personal loss, underscores their integrity and commitment to justice. This is in stark contrast to Joni, whose opaque handling of the situation and inability to present clear corroborative evidence speaks volumes about her priorities. The broader implications of this story extend beyond the Lamb family. The podcast episode serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the corrosive effects of prioritizing institutional image over individuals. Jonathan and Suzy's insistence on transparency and accountability should be a wake-up call for all ministries grappling with similar issues. Their story underscores the necessity of putting victims first and ensuring that justice, not damage control, takes precedence. Ultimately, the Lamb's testimony is not just a personal account, but a rallying cry for reform in ministry leadership. Their consistent narrative, backed by documentation, stands as a testament to the power of truth. It also exposes the hypocrisy of those who claim spiritual authority while failing to uphold the basic tenets of justice and accountability. This podcast episode should provoke not only outrage, but also reflection on the systemic changes needed to prevent such situations in the future. Jonathan and Suzy Lamb have laid out their story with clarity, courage, and conviction. In doing so, they have illuminated the stark contrast between their commitment to truth and Joni's apparent efforts to obfuscate. Their story is a powerful reminder that integrity, even at great personal cost, is the cornerstone of meaningful ministry. Anything less is a betrayal of the very principles such institutions purport to uphold. What makes the Lamb's account especially compelling is the way they contextualize their decisions and actions within the framework of family dynamics and spiritual accountability. They transparently acknowledge their mistakes while emphasizing their determination to learn from them, seek justice, and protect their daughter. This humility starkly contrasts with Joni's apparent unwillingness to engage meaningfully with the issues at hand or address the inconsistencies in her narrative. The Lambs recount a timeline of events that unfolds with a gut-wrenching inevitability, from their daughter's disturbing behavior changes to incidents that raise red flags about Pete, to the ultimate betrayal by those they trusted most. At every turn, the Lambs appear to have acted with a sincere desire to discern the truth and ensure their daughter's safety. Their reliance on law enforcement and forensic experts underscores their understanding that addressing abuse requires professional, unbiased intervention, not family meetings or self-serving declarations of innocence. Conversely, Joni's responses, as described in the episode, suggest a pattern of avoidance, minimization, and deflection. Her alleged insistence on handling matters internally, her reported discouragement of the Lambs from going to the police, and her shifting accounts all point to a lack of accountability. Her behavior mirrors a troubling trend in certain religious and organizational settings where protecting the institution takes precedence over addressing abuse. The podcast also underscores the critical role of documentation in validating the Lamb's account. Jonathan's meticulous timeline, the forensic evaluations, and even the testimony of other family members like Rebecca and J.W. create a clear, corroborated picture of what transpired. These pieces of evidence provide a firm foundation for their claims, while Joni's inability or unwillingness to provide similar documentation further undermines her credibility. Her reliance on vague assertions and unverified claims only amplifies the perception that she is attempting to manipulate the narrative rather than confront the truth. One of the most striking points raised in the episode is the psychological and emotional toll the Lamb's daughter endured, as evidenced by her interactions with forensic counselors and her reactions to Pete. The Lamb's recounting of their daughter's behavior around Pete and her subsequent reluctance to speak about the abuse are heartbreaking. These are not abstract allegations, but deeply personal accounts of a child's trauma, accounts that demand to be taken seriously. Joni's failure to acknowledge these signs or support the Lamb's efforts to seek justice is not just a failure of leadership, but a moral failure. Her actions, as described, reflect a profound disregard for the well-being of her granddaughter. Instead of championing transparency and accountability, she appears to have prioritized damage control and institutional loyalty. This raises uncomfortable but necessary questions about the culture within the ministry and its leadership. The Lamb's insistence on standing up to this culture, even at great personal cost, is a testament to their character. They have endured public vilification, familial estrangement, and financial uncertainty, all because they chose to prioritize their daughter's well-being over institutional loyalty. Their courage is a rebuke to those who would rather preserve appearances than confront hard truths. It is also an indictment of the broader culture of complicity that enables abuse to thrive in many organizational and religious settings. This episode of Wake Up and Win should serve as a wake-up call for anyone who cares about integrity in ministry. It challenges listeners to confront uncomfortable truths about power dynamics, accountability, and the moral responsibility of leaders. The Lambs' story is a sobering reminder that truth often comes at a high price, but it is a price worth paying. In closing, the Lambs' testimony is a masterclass in resilience and moral clarity. Their consistent narrative, bolstered by documentation and corroborative accounts, leaves little room for doubt. Meanwhile, Joni's inconsistencies and lack of evidence speak volumes about the fragility of her position. The contrast could not be clearer. The Lambs have stood firm in their pursuit of truth, while Joni has wavered in her attempts to defend the indefensible. The fallout from this episode will likely reverberate far beyond the Lamb family. It should prompt serious introspection among leaders and organizations about how they handle allegations of abuse, the role of transparency, and the imperative to prioritize victims over reputations. If nothing else, the Lamb's story serves as a powerful reminder that truth and accountability are non-negotiable, no matter the cost.